This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Jennifer Chapman. Welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You probably see that icon on the top says listen on Newsly. We're a featured podcast there. So after the broadcast, you can listen to us on the Newsly platform. Use coupon code GHOST to get one free month free premium subscription. This is going to be episode 932 of the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. Been on the air since 2016 on Apple Podcast. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the topic that we're trying to bring up right now. So hold a second. Here we go. Overcoming victim mentality and embracing your inner warrior. So, however you want to start with that topic, let us know, and we can kind of give you the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I'm extremely passionate about it, and as a certified life coach and speaker, it's certainly my signature topic, whether it's a workshop or a talk that I'm giving. And it all came to me when I suffered my own life challenge 6 years ago, when I suffered a life-changing stroke at age 34. I was in corporate sales, and so it's been a 6-year journey of physical, mental, and emotional recovery. And through this process, when I knew that I was going to shift from, a career into this calling that I now have to coach, I have interviews and I have several conversations a week with people all over the world. And I would unintentionally be called a stroke victim. And that's a trigger word for me. And it just was like, I would only be that if it took my life. Or I adopted a victim mentality, which is what I see lots of stroke survivors or people that have gone through, life challenges adapt. And so I just kind of thought through that. It's like, have I played a victim though before? Can I really acknowledge and become aware that I have played it before? And the answer was yes. I just didn't know at the time that's what I was doing when I was in corporate sales. And I'd come off my most successful year in 2016, and I was trying to go back to back, in 2017, and started to chase the result, chase the number, right? Not trusting the process, not trusting what was working for me the year before. This is how the talk came about, and it's what I share and what I believe a lot of people are unconsciously potentially adapting over these last 3 years, that, what the pandemic has done for everybody. And so many leaders reach out to me and say, yeah, we see our people playing this. How can you help us?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a cancer survivor. At age 27, I had a level 3 sarcoma, and it was life changing in that there was like a crucible moment. Like in my 20s, I get this life near death experience, and then I survived it. I'm age 55. And so it changed my whole outlook because, I was not somebody that was going to be on the microphone. I was a musician, but I was a keyboardist. I was in the back and never sang. I was very scared of a lot of things. And I think once you go through something that's like that type of experience, I think it either can feel like you're the victim and think things are never going to be good, or you can say, hey, I survived this. I'm happy every day I'm here, and let's see what I can do now, because now I was less fearful and I was more willing to take risks, that because I survived. Hey, I beat it. So I was like, you had that kind of mindset when you got out of that, when you survived it. It gives you kind of this survivor advantage, I think.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I think it definitely took me a couple, 2.5 years to get there, truthfully. And it was through probably a little over a year after my recovery, and I had done all the physical rehab and therapy to get to where I am. And I'm very thankful and blessed that physically you would never know that I've had a stroke. All my deficits are non-visible to the eye. So it's something I adapt with internally every single day. I will say I struggled most though, physically or mentally and emotionally, because I went back to corporate sales and I was trying to do what I did before, and it didn't feel the same at all. And also I was living with fear and anxiety of, am I going to have another stroke?
Oh, yeah.
There's that game I played with myself for probably a year. And I hired a life coach in 2018, and she's the one that really helped me understand the purpose behind this and that there was reason for it. And helped me really create and shift the perspective that I needed, that I carry with me to this day.
Yeah, I've talked to some, people who are coaches and writers and thought, people who think about that whole thing, I keep on chasing, that kind of keep on creating new goals. Because people say, oh, I want $1 million. Then they want $2 million.
Right.
Then they want like this. It's like, well, what is it that you really want? Why do you want the $1 million?
That's right.
Because that's the thing is like, why do you want it? Could you actually be happy if you got respect? If you felt safe, if you felt like all your needs were being met, maybe it isn't $1 million that you need. It's just the ability to be independent and maybe be your own boss. And maybe that's not $1 million. That's owning your own small business and being in charge. And so like people start to really question it when they get like a life coach or they get a mentor or they get a therapist and they start uncovering like what is it that you're chasing.
Yep. Yeah, well said. Look at you doing some life coaching. That is certainly what we try and support our clients to get to is like, what's that deepest desire? What's under when you say, I want to be in a relationship, or I want the promotion, or I want to make $1 million. It's the why behind that. And can we help support you in getting to that why first from the inside that will then attract everything that you may want on the outside?
Also, I wonder, like in my business, like, well, I'm an artist. I'm a music producer. I'm a creator. And what I find like a very interesting problem is people trying to aim for perfection.
Yep.
And I've always told people a lot of times, like your idea of perfection is you want to copy something. And what I try to tell artists is like your own voice, your own original idea is actually probably the most valid thing you have, right? And so you trying to be somebody else, you're probably never going to actually be that person. You'll get close, but you're not them. So wouldn't it be better to be the best version of yourself and just make you sound better and take everything about your demo and make it better? And I see that what I found in parallels in other types of work that aren't creative, where I see people doing the same type of thing, that they don't kind of they spend too much time trying to clone somebody else
How
instead of
exhausting
being
is that?
original.
Right. Right. It's like, I think what that's honestly one of the biggest lessons I feel like I've learned in the last 3 years was, for me, it was looking for that external validation before, especially being in a former athlete and career sales professional. It was always looking for someone else to acknowledge, yeah, that was good enough. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, you achieved your goal. Then it was kind of like, yeah, okay, I did, versus just looking in the mirror and being satisfied with whatever I accomplished that day or within that, tennis match or monthly goal that I hit. I've learned now to be more authentically me, is my
Yeah,
point.
I think there also is kind of like when people get into programs like a weight loss program, right?
Yeah.
And then you get into a really strict program and suddenly you mess up the diet. And so then you have some people who are so strict that you got to start all the way back from step one versus knowing that you're not perfect as a human being. And if something that seems more doable is something that you can recover from that error, right? Like if you're a musician and you're playing and you're in a group, do you make a mistake? Do you stop and start the whole song again? Or do
Mm,
you learn how to recover from the miscue and still play the song?
yeah, well said. And I think too, what I've learned from that is even the internal dialogue that you say to yourself, starting over sounds a lot different than starting again. Right?
Yeah.
Like starting over sounds like you've got to start from scratch, and that you versus starting again with the experience that you have. And a lot of
Yeah.
the time, depending on the industry that you're in with regards to like perfectionism or fear of failing or making a mistake or whatever that is for you, it's like more than half the time people aren't even going to know that you did. Only you are going to judge yourself for maybe what didn't go as well as you did, but no one else is going to know. If they do, they're not going to judge you for it. And if they do, and you're sound enough in who you are, you're not going to accept that judgment from them anyways.
Yeah, it's kind of that recovery. It's like a jazz trio. You play in fusion. It's like you go off into discordance and you come back to something that's more melody, and it's like it's all intentional or somewhat intentional. You learn how to roll with it. You roll with the punches. There's a saying in music: are there bad notes, or
Mm.
are you a musician that can recover from any scale you're in and you can cross them? Which means that you've gotten so comfortable with your capability that you don't feel like you've made a mistake. He's like, oh, that's an opportunity. That
Right.
that miscue is an opportunity to expand my mind, like a Frank Zappa point of view, or a Prince point of view, or a Hendrixian point of view. Is you go with that thing that you didn't expect, and you look at it as a way to expand your palette rather than limit yourself.
I think that's one of the prime definitions of a growth mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And I think you and I have done a lot of work and healing within ourselves to know that that's how we're going to look at a situation where I truly believe majority of human beings aren't ready to do that yet, or haven't done that, or don't understand that concept, or haven't found a way to accept that point of view. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, what I've found is like I work even with other musicians. They get caught in this trap of feeling that they've got to be perfect.
Yeah.
And then that makes them go do 100 takes when they know when you really go back and listen to it, you get a producer and they go and say, hey, the third and fourth and the fifth version is the most authentic. And maybe it's not perfect, but it's closer to your original truth of what you were doing. The further you get away from it, it actually starts to unravel and it's not what you originally were doing. Now, if that's what you think you should put out, but what we found a lot of times is those initial takes are actually the most authentic version of what the artist was doing. And telling them that, you need to release the stuff that's in the earlier version because it's actually closer to your original
Mm,
vibe than where you thought. You keep on rewriting because you're not comfortable, you're scared of what people are going to think. And even when you're experienced, there are artists that get uncomfortable with their own honesty, and that's kind of an internal issue. It's like, can they really handle it or not handle it? It's how much you are willing to put yourself out there.
yeah, that's good. Well said. It's interesting to hear the parallels of your industry with so many others, for sure. It's because at the end of the day, no matter if we're a coach, a musician, a sales executive, an athlete, I always say this when I speak to any group of people, or I do not care about your title or position. I'm here to talk to you as human beings. That's it. That's who we are at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's that human aspect, that because of the digital world and because of all these computer assistants, people tend to want to make things, perfect. They want to go and have, the perfect resume and the perfect, piece of work, to the point where, what are you going to use AI to write it? Or, because you can't handle, like, so it's a, how authentic are you going to be? Or you're so into perfection that you're going to have all these computer things come in and kind of take over. And I've been like, okay, fine, AI is good for certain things,
Right.
but if you're trying it like as an assistant, but not as the 90% source of what you're doing, as like an assistant to help you do certain tasks that are, maybe monotonous, or you could do something else. But if you use it for 90% of what the creative aspect is, then I'm kind of questioning, why are you doing that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It'll be interesting to see the direction AI takes and how much people use it, which then would take away from the authenticity of who they really are.
Yeah, and trying to be like perfect, or trying to write
Right.
something that they don't think they couldn't, then they start to use the crutch, and then how much of that is really them.
Right.
And so then that becomes like, well, how authentic is everybody now? Because you have
Right.
all your avatar is AI, your writing's AI. Is like, am I actually talking to you? or am I talking to
Right.
your AI assistant?
Right. You're
So
right.
like,
It's going to be interesting.
yeah, because you wonder you're dating, or are you talking to somebody you're taking to the AI version of that person? So,
Right. That's scary. That's
um,
true.
but like, I guess what a lesson learned, I think, is a big thing. Like my other job is I'm an IT guy. I'm a
Oh,
software designer. And one thing that that happened between this stuff we used to do in the 80s and the 90s and the stuff we do today is we have this incremental design that's never done. So we put something out and then you get 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, keep on continuous improvement because we find things that we didn't realize and we fix it. We continually push out fixes because like we're never done because new things come up. And I kind of look at life as like, okay, the old world was like, oh, we had a complete piece, and then we'd have to put a whole new piece of software on CD or something, and it
mm.
replaced that other one instead of being continually um, kind of updated. You had to get the whole new version. So, you say like life seems to be more of that incremental thing.
Oh, it's totally parallel. I think we're never done as humans, and we're continuous work in progress. I must say, I don't know if I had that perspective though before 6 years ago. I certainly just have
Mm.
had that shift in perspective where I now unselfishly, continue to make myself a priority, truthfully, like whatever that looks like each and every day. And be, I learned this first in sale in the corporate sales world that I was in, and then took it through my stroke recovery. It's a book by John Gordon, I believe, but our sales manager would always say, can you be 1% better than you were the day before? Right. It's like not looking at the mountain the next day, or when you set a new goal and it looks so huge that's where
Yeah,
people say, like, I'm not even gonna take the first step because it looks so big.
it's too hard.
But it's like, what's one thing you can do today that you didn't do yesterday, or that would, you know, make you feel 1% better than you were yesterday? Maybe it's a shift in attitude, or an effort or a task. It's like the small things become the big things. And the more you do the small things on a consistent, steady basis, you will continuously see results and see yourself evolve.
It's like when you manifest things, because like my big example, another artist's idea was the idea like David Bowie kind of manifest the idea like Ziggy Stardust was a made up thing. But by the time he finished that, he had actually made it come true.
Mm,
The whole idea of that theatrical presentation, he actually became that rock star and became that big. And it was all just because he had the kind of will to say, what happens if I use theater in music and make that part of the whole show and actually become the character like a method actor. And so he Lady Gaga does a similar type of style, but it was a different approach than just being a pure musician. It was like part showman, part artist, part actor. um and so he actually made it so because he kind of just made that story become real.
I love that. And I love surrounding myself with people that do that, because it just continuously shows how powerful manifestation actually is. And again, that's a mindset thing. It's truly believing before seeing it that it's going to happen, and putting yourself in a position to be in that place even though you're not there yet, versus letting your mind control you and tell you that that's it, it's never going to happen for you. And a lot of people don't even know how much they believe their mind, and that's what's holding them back. No one else is. Their own
Yeah,
mind
it's like
does.
yeah, if you think about it, when you're in school, how many kids don't raise their hand because they're scared of what the
Mm,
other kids are going to say, right? They're
man,
gonna
that's
they're gonna label you as a nerd, or you get the answer wrong. You get so frightened of the response, you never say anything.
yep,
You don't do anything. And then you get a couple of the more assertive people, they go and take the lead and they become the leaders because they're willing to do it. And you kind of
that's
step
right.
back and like, well, how can they do that? How can you do that? Well, because you have to take that step to make yourself a little vulnerable. And I
Yes.
think that's hard. I mean, everybody has to figure out where that is. But even if you're not an artist, you've got if you're going to be a public speaker, you got to take that step to get on that podium.
Oh
If you're
yeah.
going to go, you're going to. At all these different levels, it's like the same level of effort for an artist to go on stage in front of like 1,000 people or 10,000 people. They got to make that decision, believe they belong on the stage,
That's right. It's all
and
about
you
like
can psych
what's your
yourself out of being on
relationship?
stage.
Yeah, what's your relationship with fear? Are you going to let fear control you, or are you going to, you know, acknowledge the fear for showing up, say thanks, understand why it's there, and put it in the back seat and not let it take over the driver's seat and hold you back?
And processing grief, for artists, it's like our primary motivator.
Mm,
And sometimes it's a problem because a lot of times as artists, our best work comes from the fact that we can take these crucible, painful moments and turn them into work. And then the problem becomes, do I have to always be in that kind of state to
mm.
do that work? And a lot of times our best work is when we were in that state. And then when we get happy, we don't get the same critical acclaim for our happy work versus our work when we weren't happy.
That's fascinating.
So for you, you have one of the questions you like to answer is like, what's the biggest lesson learned from processing your grief? So I would think you probably found a way to channel that into a productive thing or process.
Yeah, it was a powerful question that my life coach had asked me 5 years ago when I was, in a very emotional, vulnerable, instability state of mind. And she asked me, it was one of our first sessions. She's like, instead of saying why me, which she had asked me if I had asked myself that, like, why me? And that was what I didn't know then, that, someone with a victim mentality is always going to ask themselves. And what I've seen lots of stroke survivors ask themselves, why me? And I remember telling her, no, I hadn't done that. But I had, I'm surrounded by family and friends that were saying that all the time. I can't believe this happened to Jennifer. Why Jennifer? And she just looked at me as a matter of fact and said, that's because you need to ask yourself, why not me? And I was like,
Hmm.
that lands differently. Let me process that for a little while. And she said, everything happens for you, not to you. And once you accept that, that's where freedom is, and that's me wrapping my head around that this having a stroke at 34 was a true gift. I certainly would not be where I am today as a business owner and coach and speaker had I not had something like that happen for me. And it was all about how I handled it. And I'm very proud of how I've handled it, all of it. And it's therapeutic for me to share the roller coaster ride that it certainly has been. And when I was working with her and I was so emotional, it certainly was because there was a grief process there, that I was letting go of a version of myself that I knew was not coming back, right? And it was accepting and embracing this new version of myself. And I will add to that, uh, having a stroke at 34 was not only significant in the fact of having a stroke at 34 and feeling like I was a pretty healthy woman before, when this happened, is that my mom was 34 when she passed away and I was 11.
Oh, wow.
So understanding and wrapping my head around grief at a young age has really been a work in progress up until this very day, truthfully. And so that all kind of came full circle when I worked with my coach, and really truthfully had not, I don't think I had processed and handled and gone through the grief until 2 years ago when I went through my coaching certification and had the opportunity to work with a high level coach and have a pretty powerful coaching session, truthfully. And that's where it all kind of came together for me.
So your mother's death must have been in your back of your mind, causing you some more anxious, like more anxiety, because you went through the same kind of, well, you went through a near death experience, so you're like, wow, I kind of went through it and I survived. So then you're like, probably, well, you said you were kind of worried you're going to have another one.
Yeah. Yeah. And because they didn't know why I had my first one. So they were, I was continuously going to doctors and
Mhm.
trying to figure out answers and, get answers. And that took a year and a half for them to do that. So it made sense that I was living with so much anxiety, although at the time I did not know that's why. And also
Mhm.
that there was a lot of just stuck energy within me, right? Like we're all walking around as energy. And I would feel safe to guess that these last 3 years of going through an international pandemic that no one, we've all now dealt with something pretty massive that I believe has only elevated or amplified anything else that you have not dealt with yet. If you
Yeah.
have not healed from something, resolved something, healed from something, if you haven't, it's going to continue to show up in your present life until you're ready to face it.
It
A lot of people aren't
compounds
ready
it.
to face it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why you have so much anxiety and so many people who are kind of keyed up because they didn't, they had this unresolved issue and then this other thing comes that's a crisis on top of a crisis they haven't addressed. So
100%.
then, yeah, then that causes all kinds of stress and all kinds of, I'm a sociology major, it's causing all this macrocosm behavior, but you haven't dealt with the microcosm, which is your individual self.
That's right.
So you might be affected by anomie or like this, you're feeling resentful because you don't feel you're part of something or you're being pulled out of something. And then you're looking at groups of people and group dynamics are, part of what sociology is all about. And you see with the pandemic, like all this group dynamic happening, like on social, political, economic, religious, multiple layers of all these things happen. And people are kind of unconscious or think that words don't matter or think that certain things don't matter. And it's, oh, they aren't as thoughtful or kind of holistic in their thinking, don't understand how things thread together. And then they're just don't have the tools to process what's going on.
Not only that, do they want the tools to process what's going on?
You might
Are they
not.
even willing and ready to become a lot of people are just truthfully not self-aware. And that's always the first step. And so when I speak about victim mentality and I talk about here's what it looks like, feels like, sounds like, and oh, by the way, here's where it comes from. That's where it makes people uncomfortable because it usually comes from something in their past. And a lot of times it's rooted in your childhood. You are all patterns and behaviors all stem from when you're about 7, 8, 9 years old. When you're developing these relationships with your parents and school, and it's all learned behavior, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you want to admit like, man, I'm just like my dad, although I had a terrible relationship with him, right? Because I learned this from him, or he showed me this or said this to me, or whatever that was. That's deeply rooted in you but it doesn't have to stay that way. And so that's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
the masterful. That's where coaching's so powerful. I mean, and so is therapy. And don't get me wrong, there is certainly a place for therapy. And I tried that first. I went to a couple different therapists. It was just an emotionally draining experience for me. And I felt like I wasn't moving forward, where that's the difference within coaching, is meeting somebody where they are and helping you move forward. Although we may have to go back to kind of acknowledge this is where this comes from. But now I'm ready to
yeah.
up level or upgrade my way of being.
Well, sometimes some therapists, it seems like you're going to continually be in therapy and you're looking for the end state and you're hoping for like a magic bullet, but sometimes that's not going to really happen if you got to keep on uncovering the onion.
Yes.
So a lot of problems, I think, with what I've seen is people, they have that inner child belief that really they think is the truth because somebody told me, oh, well, you're not going to amount to anything or you're not good enough. And they get told by, somebody that, and whether, or they, as a young person, they perceive like, my parents don't like me. They
Right.
don't love me. Then
Right.
they feel that's the truth until they get to some place where they can challenge that belief that they think is the truth, but it's really just something that somebody said. It's not true. So you have to be ready to handle that. And like you said, some people are not ready to actually go at that because it's
You're
like
right.
that means you have to take some responsibility to actually take the time to do it.
Yep.
And at some point you might have to do it because like you'll hit the wall.
Not only that, your body's going to tell you. in some way that you're going to have to deal with that. A powerful lesson I've learned, again, not only through my stroke recovery, but going through the coaching certification I went through. She was very much, her background's somatic psychotherapy. And so it's all about the body. Our body's always telling us something. It has stored every single thing we've ever been through in our lives, and it's taken note. We've just been taught not to listen, right? Until we have to be reactive to something. Our body's, it's saying, just like my stroke. There were a couple of red flags a year before my stroke, and I had no idea that they were. But that was my body way of saying, maybe pay attention to this, right? Where I ended up having to be reactive. And it could have gone a lot of different directions. And so now I'm very hyper aware of what my body's always telling me. And that's an extreme example. But even, a minor example is like eating something. And your body's probably telling you, I don't like this, right? Like this hurts somewhere, right? This hurts my stomach, or I'm having indigestion or whatever it is. But we're taught and trained to like, but it tasted so good. I'm just going to take something and hope that discomfort goes away. And I'm probably going to eat it again because it was that good. When your body's really telling you like, I don't like this. Or if alcohol, our body doesn't like it. We may like it.
Yeah.
But our body's usually going to tell us after a certain point, like, I don't like it. This isn't good. It hurts. Like, right. You'll get a headache or stomachache or worse. So it's really paying attention and listening to your body's way of telling you it's time to listen. It's time to wake up. It's time to be proactive in so many different scenarios. And like you said, our thoughts are just thoughts, but our minds are meaning-making machines. So we're going to tie meaning to all these thoughts that mean nothing until we tie a story to it and then get looped into that story and really believing that it's truth. When really I tell my clients, like, anytime you've got a thought come up, ask yourself, is this true? Is this 100% true? Or can I let this go? Am I judging something about it? Or is this just a misunderstanding I had? And come back to your truth and then be able to move forward from there.
Yeah, it's definitely like the truth is like, when you're like a creative person, you try to go at like your inner thoughts and put them out. So you kind of challenge yourself to put out like something that's very personal,
Right.
but then make it connect to the world, because then like what you're feeling, other people probably feel. And I
Totally.
think creative people, we have the ability that kind of comes to us, and we find it's kind of a cathartic process to put it out there. But I think for other people who don't have a way to just do that as part of their being, it seems sometimes it builds up, or they don't listen to it, or they listen to it too much and they don't know what to do with it other than to kind of beat themselves up.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like finding that you need a coach, you need a therapist, you need somebody to talk to work these things out. That it's not something that you can just like struggle through, which I think some people are kind of taught by whatever their parents believe, or their spiritual, their religion believes, that, oh, you should just like struggle through this. That's actually worth something to actually, struggle instead of try to survive or thrive. Like, why do you have to do that? Why do you have to suffer?
Right. Well, it's like, and you can't overcome anything without going through it. And I think so many people just try and overcome it and think that it's going to go away. It's not going to go away until you walk through it. And I always say, like, going through, a really hard, a big T trauma, even any trauma, right? Everybody's gone through trauma. There's a full spectrum of what trauma can be. And until you've dealt with it, it's like time doesn't heal. Right? Everybody, I think that's an old school mentality of like, just give it time. If you don't do the work along with the time, you're never going to come to a true healing. You've got to go through it. You've got to walk through it.
Passing time with no actions or no resolution or no planning, you're just going to be perpetuating whatever was or whatever is.
Yeah, and it's going to potentially end up feeling and being bigger than you thought that it was going to be. And then you're going to have to really face it. It could feel harder than it would have been had you just taken a little bit more action prior. And like you said, I think it's you're taught ways of doing that potentially by your parents and your upbringing and all of that. And there's just some of that's old school mentality, right? Like my grandpa was always like, suck it up. It would be uncomfortable to make, to cry in front of him. He didn't understand that. And I'm going to guess that's how a lot of dads and grandpas were, and maybe moms, depending on where you're at. Like that's just how it was. And I'm thankful that I've been in a family where it was unfortunate. We went through like a really hard loss at a young age that I saw, my dad was extremely emotional for a very long time. And so I bared witness to that. And I'm thankful that he's a sensitive guy and is not sorry to show his emotions. And that's the other thing with women, I think, is that we've been taught to hide our emotions and to apologize for when they show up. And, especially don't bring it into a professional environment. Like hide it, mask it, push it down, fight it, resist it. And I say now to women when I speak, it's like, it basically hurts to hold back tears. What's harder, right? To really like fight back the tears and hold them, push them down, or to let it out. Where that may be uncomfortable for like a couple minutes, but then you feel a lot better. And then you're able to move forward.
Yeah. I think, we're often taught to like hide the things, that's embarrassing, or that you shouldn't show weakness, or you shouldn't, show vulnerability. But like I said, in the arts, it's like that's one of our kind of badge of honor is like we like to show the vulnerability. That's part of like it show as much vulnerability as possible to the point where sometimes we show too much. And then it's like think what do we have for ourselves if we're revealing that much? So then we have to have ways to kind of work through it because it becomes, is it cathartic or do you end up kind of hurting yourself? So there's a balance to everything. You can't be extreme in it. Any type of behavior as human, you can get extreme at it. You can get to a point where it's not productive and it actually can hurt you.
Right.
And you can see that, within arts, it can happen that way too.
I believe that.
But what is it? Well, I guess there's a question is like, what does it look like to embrace your inner warrior? I think we've been talking about the fact that you were able to come out of the, be a stroke survivor and then thrive and feel more comfortable with yourself. But what is it that you do when you embrace your inner warrior?
That's such one of the most powerful questions. And truthfully, through me creating this business and becoming a coach and doing my own work, when I first kicked off this warrior mentality, it was certainly very much more about, control what you can control. And it all starts with you and your mind and your thoughts and how to shift that. And here are tools to do so. So it's certainly a mindset, comes with the mindset piece of it. However, I will also add, it's what you mentioned earlier, and where I'm becoming more comfortable in expressing what your inner warrior truly is, and it is your inner child. It's like little Jennifer. I had to meet her a couple of years ago, and I hadn't met her in a really long time. Like when I had to go find a picture of myself at 6 or 7. She's sitting here on my desk, and have a conversation with her. One of the most powerful things I've ever done. And knowing like anytime you feel anxious, that anxiety that so many people are dealing with all the time. I'm a big Mel Robbins fan, and I listen to her podcast often. And I think she was interviewing a guest recently that said, anytime you feel anxiety, that's just your younger self wanting to be acknowledged. Just wants to be seen.
Well, that's interesting. That's a good way to look at it, because
It's your body's
an inner
alarm.
child. Yeah, I mean that's like a, a, a common theme I've talked to a lot of life coaches in the last year, and it seems to always be something that you acknowledge when you start to understand like your holistic nature, because some people, they don't consider like their mind, their body, the spirit, the whole package. They want
Mm,
to think of one part of it. It's like the whole thing. And then like the source of where you probably are having some issues is unresolved inner child. And a
totally.
lot of us musicians, people say, well, you're immature. Well, I'm musicians that were somewhat immature because we were like following our inner child
That's right. That's
most
right.
of the time.
Yeah, and I think so many people are scared to even so much emotion comes up when you even talk about inner child, let alone when you get out a picture of him or her and put them in front of you and go into this conversation of, when you go through your own limiting beliefs and you're being guided by a coach to say like, okay, well, if you were facing this little girl in the corner that were saying these words like I'm not good enough, what would you bend down and say to her? And then it's automatically bringing it back like, did you receive that? Because that's what you needed to hear. If you're struggling that, right? Like you talk to yourself as you would talk to this, to be able to look at my 7-year-old self. I mean, she brings me so much joy. I can't even handle it. Like she was incredible, awesome, and it's always remembering to be able, no matter what kind of day I'm having, especially the hard days, being able to like look at her in the face and knowing she is within me and that's available to me at any time, all the time. And I want that's my message for both men and women. Like they're in there ready to come out, and shine. And you've just piled on all these stories and misunderstandings and judgments that are covering them up, and they're ready to come back out and just be inherently who you are meant to be in this world at your soul level, at your core level. That is who I am as a coach, and how, what I hope to do for others is to acknowledge it's all about mastery of self. It's coming back to self-love, self-acceptance, self-awareness, self-forgiveness, self-compassion, self-kindness. It's like you can't give that to anybody else if you can't give that to yourself first.
You have to try to find the point in your life where you felt that there were possibilities,
That's
that
right.
you thought you could do this, you thought you could do that, and then people started telling you, well, maybe you can't. And so then do you grow up and grow out of all your ambitions, or do you actually go back and say, you know what? I do want to be an artist.
Mm.
I do want to be a photographer.
Right.
I do want to go out and go into that coffee shop and read poetry, or
Mm.
go out and try to film a film, or try to do something, go and try to, you know, learn dance, and people told you couldn't dance. It's like, well, you really wanted to do that.
Yep.
And then people told you got responsibilities, you got to have a mortgage, you got to do this. So people start to find, like, is it immature? Is it selfish to want to try to do some of those childhood things, or those dreams? Like, I don't think so. I think that's how you get to be you. If you start to embrace those things that you thought, you maybe you could do until people told you that it was like, oh, that's a no go. And then you
Right.
say, okay. But, I think eventually you have to start to point, realize like, yeah, you don't have to listen to that. You
Right.
can try it. There's nothing wrong with trying something.
And if they've got a problem with it, that's their problem. That's not your problem at all. It's the most powerful thing you can do is get out of your own way.
Yeah.
Like I am the only person that is going to get in my way of what I know, where I want to be and who I want to be. No one else is going to do that. And I think I'm in a place that I know I can confidently say that. Where I think there's probably lots of people that would, on the surface level would say, well, I've been, have believed what they've been told. Well, they told me I couldn't do that. My parents never believed in
Yeah.
me. My company doesn't believe in me. Like my siblings, my best friend, whomever that is. It's like, why are you giving them the control and the power over you? I am all about like, let's take your power back. Let's embrace who you were meant to become.
Yeah. You never want to be in your own way. I mean, I came up with a song lyric that was basically a character's like never in her own way was the name of the song. And this idea this person found that they weren't going to be in their own way anymore. It was like a liberation type of song of figuring out like, oh, I can give myself permission, and it doesn't matter what anybody else says, that I can do whatever I want to do. And yes, within songs, you can kind of build this like cinematic. I like to think about sound paintings or cinematic ideas, but you take a concept and you try to make it real, make it happen. And it's like a little tiny arc that could be 5 minutes long, and you're just trying to get this piece of work out that you're communicating this idea. And I just find it's a really cool way to work things out, whether or not they become hits or not. But it's like
Right.
how I work out ideas in my head. I'll think of a concept and then I'll make that happen. And it's its own little world. You make it happen, you put it out. And I think if you apply that to your life with your goals, it's like, why not go and say you want to go out and, make that thing happen by actually speaking it and not just dreaming about it, but actually writing it down in a journal or a diary or vocalizing it with friends and letting people know that that's what you want,
Mm.
then things start to happen.
Couldn't have said it better myself. There's power in getting it out, whether it comes, whatever it becomes,
Oh yeah.
but to not keep it up in your head. Again, it was a Mel Robbins episode that she was interviewing. I think it was like a neuropsychologist. And he said, nothing ever gets solved up here. This will do you no good, right? This is a coping mechanism, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. You can't outthink your way to where you want to be. It's like, you've got to drop in and go down here to really do the work and heal. And I'm like, that just made so much sense to me.
It's like your website says just commit coaching.
Yeah.
And that feels like a slogan, like, or like your mantra. But it's like, to me, yeah, it's kind of like, just do it, but that seems like less helpful. But just commit, it's like, well, that's more informative. Just do it is like, what do you mean? Okay, I understand you would say just do it, but commit is a little more descriptive, showing that you need to put some effort into what you want to believe and what you want to do.
Yeah, thank you. I receive lots of compliments on my name, and I'm very proud of my name. And I truthfully, I like to share how I came up with it. And it was because through healing after my stroke, I found Pilates as a new way to exercise. And the studio that I go to is called Just Breathe. And what I've noticed, and I've been doing it for almost 6 years now, each class is hard in some capacity. We'll be in this most uncomfortable position, and she'll say, okay, just hold. Like, right, we're just going to hold this pose, or we're just pulse, just lift. But we're in a really uncomfortable position, and she just makes it sound like so easy. Okay, just hold. And it's like, it's so much more than that, and that's exactly how I came up with Just Commit. It's like, I'm asking you to commit to just 3 months of work with me, or 6 months of work with me, or to this program. But there's so much more to that. And ultimately you're committing to yourself. That's it. Are you willing to commit and go all in on you, for you? So many people
I think
try and go 99%. And it's our coach is like, it's way harder to go 99% than it is to go 100%. And I'm like, man, you're right. Yeah. Right? Like a simple example, she's like, okay, raise your hand as high as you can. And we all raise our hand. She's like, now raise it just a little bit more. You can raise it a little bit more. She's like, now why didn't you do that the first time when I asked you to raise it as high as you can? I'm like, man, what a great visual example of how we've been hardwired and trained as human beings.
Yeah, trained not to really do the most first, is like, try, maybe it's not the best effort. It's like, just get away with it effort.
Yeah, okay, I'll raise my hand.
Just kind of phone it in. It's like kind of like, it's like a producer when I ask somebody, like, show me your best lick. And then he's like, was that really your best lick? And I'm like, oh no, I was holding back. He's like, but didn't I tell you to show me your best one?
That's how we're hardwired. And the real win is like, I don't even know if I love the word pushing through that, but challenging yourself and proving to yourself what you're truly capable of, because we're capable of so much more than we think that we are. We just hold ourselves back. We believe the stories that we're telling ourselves that we can't do it, or that we're not good enough, or that we're not strong enough, or we're not talented enough. We
Yeah, I
believe
think
that.
part of it is like overthinking. There's some things like when if you get an athlete like and they've done all that muscle memory practice, and then they do that 3 point shot, it's like automatic because they've
Yes.
been practicing. So you had to do that level of practice, like 10,000 repetitions to get to be an expert. Same thing like a bass player or a piano player. Once they've
Right.
got that muscle memory tied to their fingertips, they can do anything. And then it's a mental thing because like musically they're capable of doing anything ever. It's like the only thing that stops them is their limiting belief. Is like, oh, you know, it's a mind thing, and most of the time it's a mind thing that causes the issue. Is like either you're too much in your head, you're not in the flow, you're not
Yeah.
really feeling the muse. You're letting other things interrupt it. So you have to kind of get this point where you connect to that kind of real, true, like artistic or positive vibe that's going to make you get your fulfill all the things you want without overthinking and thinking you can't do it. Because as soon as you start thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to miss the note, then you're going to
Yep.
miss the note.
Right. Yes. It all comes back to self-awareness. And I heard another great example of that is, are you familiar with Simon Sinek?
Yeah, I think I believe I'm aware of it.
He's all about the why. Know your why. But he talks about your mind, and he's like, if you're on skis and you're going down the slope and you're telling yourself, don't look at the trees, don't look at the trees, don't look at the trees,
You hit the tree.
all you're going to look at is the trees, right? Versus saying like, just focus down, go down the slope. You've got this. You can do this. Just focus on the hill. You, right? Like it is the mastery of self-talk and this conversation relationship we have with ourselves, because we, and using that to our advantage and our strength versus, the negative, which is the fear. Knowing your fear, and knowing it's not a fact, it's just a feeling, and paying attention to it and acknowledging it, but then putting it in the back seat and letting you still take over your steering wheel, the driver's seat.
Yeah, fear seems to cause the most problems. It causes all kinds of conflicts within yourself and
Totally.
the microcosm and the macrocosm. All the big, you know, conflicts are always because of some kind of fear issue. Even when somebody's being aggressive, it's usually why are they being so aggressive? Because of fear. And it's
Yeah,
like
it's their
it's
own
all
ego.
about trying
It's the
to
ego.
lessen that fear and make people actually start to actually use their full capacity to analyze the situation they're in and not just be kind of reactive, kind of fight or flight. You get into
Right.
this fight or flight mentality because of fear, and you're
Yep.
not holistically thinking or looking at things in a logical way or even harmonious way. You're just so scared. You're like animal snake brain, reptile brain to take over.
Totally. And that takes a lot of work. As someone who's done a lot of work and knows that it's going to continue to take a lot of work. But it feels easier for me now, right? Because I've done this now for a few years, is paying attention to when that fear does come up, or that self-doubt, or whatever that is for me, to make sure it does not take over my day or that task at hand. And it's all about creating a new relationship with it. Like, I see
Yeah,
you. Thanks for showing up. It's all a protection thing. It's acknowledging it's just here to protect you. And it's worked for you in some capacity, you wouldn't still be doing it.
yeah. You don't have to
It's a,
throw it all out. It's just a
yeah,
matter of like degrees of relevance. That do somebody cuts you off? Do you do a road rage? Or somebody says something that triggers you, do you go from like 0 to 100, or do you actually
right.
have your kind of playbook and you've actually set up your pathways to understand, hey, this isn't a situation I need to fight. This is not that. There are situations where in the future I might have to fight or flee, but
Yep.
this doesn't actually measure up to that. And you can assess it without fear for yourself that you have to do an immediate reaction. You know, I think that's where you start to learn, you know, when you learn how to live in that kind of world,
Oh,
how you fit in there. Yeah.
and speaking of, I feel like at least this country right now, they are in fight or flight mode for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with that.
Just
Yeah,
on the
being in
roads
a
alone, let
situation where I'm kind of
alone.
like the other to some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can
Yeah,
get
we're
that. I mean, I can walk down the street and I can see people, some situations where people don't know me and then they clench their pocketbook or something because they have a perception
mm,
they were
yeah,
given that's actually not based on anything they actually experienced, but something somebody told them.
that's
So
right.
then they've got the wrong idea and they immediately think that there's an issue. But then if once they hear me talk, then suddenly, oh, he's not what I thought. Then I was like,
Yeah.
okay, it was like that's how it works.
But because
But
of like you're comfortable in your own skin, so you don't take any of that personally, which is powerful.
well,
Like
yeah,
that
you have
doesn't
to kind of
trigger
learn.
you.
Yeah, you have to learn how to deal with it. Why?
You do.
Some people don't. Some people get
Right.
in a situation where they get so upset by it, but it's like, you know what? That's the state of the world.
Yep.
And so somebody's got to be more mature about it.
Thank you
So,
for being that
y-
person.
that's the way you have to, because who wants to get into fights all the time? That's not my style. But,
Right.
yeah, I think, I think people need to know when they need to commit and they talk to a life coach like yourself. And I want people who are on the audio podcast, maybe we've been kind of referring to it. You have a website, https:// justcommitcoaching.com. And so if people click on that, what would they find there? What do they get into when you click on that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. A couple of things. When you click on that, you can automatically there's a free download for you on there that just provides some tips and tools for you to try on when it comes to creating shifts in your mindset. And here are things when you start to pay attention to what you tell yourself, those self conversations, right? For example, saying like I can't or I need, try saying this instead. I can do this, and here's why I can do this, and provide yourself some examples. Or I don't need to do this, but I get to do this. Or not using the word but, actually, and using the word and. Such powerful, small, simple changes within your own dialogue are game changers. So that there's a free download there for you, as well as I offer complimentary coaching sessions. So if you've never had a coach before and you want to just explore a conversation or something's on your mind, you just schedule a call with me right there on my website. But I offer one-to-one coaching, small group coaching, and companies and organizations that are interested in supporting their teams, I offer workshops as well. And I love to speak
Well,
and share my story. So thank you.
that's awesome. I want to let people know that that is clickable on the published versions of the podcast, and the Family Electric Ghost podcast is pretty much everywhere you can watch or listen to a podcast. And so we're going to create a landing page available for your audience by tomorrow. And so wherever they like to watch or listen to podcasts, they'll be able to find that from like Apple to iHeartRadio to Amazon, Google, Twitch, all the different places that it can be found. And so we provide that to your audience and you can use that by tomorrow. We have been on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch, and I will send you the Facebook and YouTube permanent links directly after we're off the air. And thank you for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. We like to have people come on the show and speak about their area of expertise. And it's really cool to hear different voices every night. And thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to share my story with your audience. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, you as well.